This video will demonstrate corrugated ribbing. These are my mill trail mitts, and here I've used an Estonian cast-on to have a bit of a decorative edge that has this nice kind of purl bump or garter stitch look to it and has some stretch. And the corrugated ribbing is such that I am going to purl in the same color as my cast-on so that I don't need any kind of setup around. So here I have an inverted pair with the colors. Here I cast on with my dark brown and my pearls are in dark brown. And here I cast on with my contrast color, this yellow orange, and my pearls are in yellow orange. So in the example I've cast on here, I've used a brown. Now in this example with the Estonian cast on, I used my slip knot and I slipped it over on magic loop to be my last stitch, and I will work two together for joining in the round. You can disregard that if you'd like. The most important thing when you're learning a new technique is to learn the foundation of the technique, and then you can layer whatever kind of tools in your toolbox you have that you prefer for things like joining in the round or jogless joins and so on. And so I'm going to use for my contrasting color here a white. Let's here start with a knit stitch so that we're doing a knit purl. So we are going to start with a knit stitch in our contrasting color. And then I'm going to take my working yarn from my cast on and I'm going to work a purl stitch. Now, what's important is as you are carrying your yarn, ideally you're going to carry the same float underneath. So it doesn't hugely matter for dominance in terms of color dominance if you're thinking of things like stranded knitting, two-handed knitting, but you will get different effects based on which one is carried which way, based on your tension. So read your pattern, understand what your pattern is trying to do, understand the effects you're trying to get, and if there's a reason, and then just be consistent with what you're doing here. So if you're carrying both in the same hand, carry the same float beneath. If you're going to be picking up and putting down, pick them up and put them down on the same side. And if you're going to use two-handed knitting, be consistent with which yarn color is in which hand. So for the sake of this demonstration, what I will do is I will hold my dark yarn above, my light yarn below. It's kind of the one that's going to pop. So if you want to think of it that way, that my lowest float is going to be my pop of color or my dominant color, you can think of it that way. So I'm going to knit and then I'm going to drop it and I'm going to bring the yarn to the front to purl. And I'm showing you this way so that it's the most accessible. I am just showing you, you don't have to be a color work wizard to knit corrugated ribbing. You just need to be consistent and patient, I guess. So you're going to knit and purl. And of course, if you prefer two-handed color work, if you prefer holding both in one hand and picking, whatever method you prefer is absolutely fine. What you want to make sure is that your floats are loose enough across the back. It's just one by one. So it's not something where you're going to have it really pulling across a number of stitches, but it's still good to move your stitches down as you go so that they don't bunch up and cause a tighter tension. In this case, it is for a cuff, so you want it to be a little bit snug. You want to have negative ease, but you don't want it to be cutting off your circulation. Okay, so knit to the front and purl. Knit, purl, and what I do also want to show you is at the turn, you want to make sure you're holding your yarns to the wrong side of the work. So let's just get there. You always want to make sure that after you purl, you're remembering to move that yarn to the back of the work. Whoops. Slip popped out there. Okay. Okay, now I'm at the turn and I'm using magic loop. So you can see here when I turn, what I want to make sure as I pull my needle so that I can knit the other half of my stitches, I want to make sure this yarn is to the back. I don't want it to be accidentally to the front. Even if I were going to purl next, I want to make sure that everything at the turn looks good before I purl. In this case, I'm at a knit stitch anyway, so I definitely want it in the back, but let's see, remember we were carrying the white one below, so we want to maintain that at the curve. Again, this isn't going to be something that hugely affects your end product on something like a mitt, but it is good practice to practice your best techniques while you're learning, and then you form good habits. So again, you're going to knit here and then come to the front to purl. And you're going to do that all the way around, and you're just going to keep going. You're going to knit your knits in the same color and purl your purls in the same color, and you're going to end up with a beautiful corrugated ribbing. You might be using a variegated color, but corrugated ribbing. Simple way to add some real decorative elements to your knitting, whether or not it's written into the pattern. Just make sure that if you are doing something that's not written into the pattern, you are aware of the characteristics that might change from what's in the pattern. So in the case of a corrugated ribbing, where you do have floats, and let's just look at those floats for a minute. You do have floats here. What you want to make sure is that if you need a certain amount of stretch, let's say it's a hat brim, for example, and it wasn't in the pattern and you want to add it, you want to make sure that you still have enough stretch at that brim, or that if you need to, you check your gauge and you might need to size up, or you might need to cast on a few more stitches for your ribbing in order to incorporate a design element that has different fabric characteristics from the pattern that you're working.